Station Theta hung silently at the edge of known space. Its walls were metallic gray, polished smooth from decades of maintenance by the various alien species who called it home. Lights glimmered in the corridors, and the soft hum of life support systems echoed faintly like a heartbeat. The station was a center for research, a place where the galaxy's brightest minds came to study signals and phenomena that no one else could explain. Among the station's residents were species of every shape and size. The Varine were tall and angular, their translucent skin showing faint traces of internal circuits. The Thaler had long arms and 4 eyes, each moving independently to observe their surroundings. And the small, clever creatures called Nico moved through the vents, repairing minor mechanical failures unnoticed by anyone. On this quiet day, a small shuttle approached the station. It had no markings, no registration, no traceable origin. Its shape was unusual, low and compact, unlike the sleek crafts designed for interstellar travel. The station's scanners immediately registered an anomaly, alerting the control room. Commander Dras, a Varine with a calm and calculating manner, leaned forward, his multiple eyes narrowing. "Unknown vessel approaching," Dras said. His voice carried authority, though a hint of curiosity touched it. "Prepare to hail the ship." The communication system crackled. There was a pause. Then a simple human voice spoke, soft but clear. "I do not come to fight. I only ask for permission to dock." Dras exchanged glances with the other officers. None of them had heard this species before. They consulted their database. Humans were considered extinct in most of known space. The records described them as fragile, primitive, and long gone after a great war on Earth centuries ago. Yet here was one, asking politely to dock. "Docking permission granted," Dras said carefully. "State your name and purpose." The voice replied, "My name is Mara. I am here to assist." A single human emerged from the shuttle as it docked. Mara walked calmly down the ramp, her uniform simple and faded, adorned with symbols the station had never seen. She carried nothing but a small bag, yet there was a confidence in her stride that made the crew tense. A scientist named Dran, a Thaler with quick-moving eyes, stepped forward. "How is this possible?" he muttered. "Humans have not existed in living form for centuries." Mara looked at him and smiled faintly. "I am not what you expect, but I am real. You will see." The station's security scanned her as she moved through the main hall. When the genetic scanners activated, the result shocked everyone. The screen displayed 99% unknown. Only 1% matched the human database. Alarms were quiet but urgent. Dras's voice carried over the hall. "Containment protocol initiated. Do not touch. This is an unknown biological entity." Mara did not flinch. She watched the scanning process with calm curiosity. "Don't worry about what you do not understand. Worry about what you cannot control," she said softly. Her words had weight. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. The scientists debated what to do. Dran was fascinated. "This DNA, it is unlike anything in our records. It is adaptive, responsive, almost aware of itself. Look at the repair sequences. They activate faster than the cell's natural cycles. Radiation, toxins, extreme cold. She should not survive any of it." Mara, standing quietly, said, "I have survived. That is enough for now." Meanwhile, the security team remained tense. Guards whispered among themselves, speculating if she was dangerous. Commander Dras ordered surveillance and limited interaction. "She may be a miracle," he said, "but she may also be a weapon. We cannot risk it." Mara was assigned a small living area. It was basic but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a view of the stars. She spent hours observing the cosmos through the window. The other scientists began to notice small things. Every time Mara approached a scanner or a computer system, minor glitches occurred. The screens flickered. Some sensors reported impossible readings. Dran approached Mara one evening while she was reading a data terminal. "Do you do this on purpose?" he asked. "You seem to affect the systems around you." Mara looked up, calm and unafraid. "Sometimes the body knows more than the mind," she said. "Some things cannot be measured with machines." Dran frowned. "But the scanners, they cannot handle it. They cannot understand what you are. Even the AI reports errors it has never reported before." Mara smiled. "I am not here to break your machines. I am here to show you that life is not always what it seems. There is more than the 99% you know." That night the station went into its normal low-power mode. Lights dimmed in the corridors and the hum of life support filled the halls. Mara walked alone along the observation deck, staring at a distant star cluster. She muttered quietly to herself, words no one else could hear, though the camera systems recorded her movements. Suddenly, a soft alarm went off in the lab. The genetic scanners, which had been stable for hours, suddenly restarted themselves. Symbols appeared on the screens, patterns none of the staff recognized. Dran rushed in, eyes wide. "What is this?" he shouted. "These readings are changing by themselves." Mara remained calm. "I do not change them. They react to presence. Sometimes observation is not enough. Interaction is necessary." Dran felt a chill. Her words were simple, but they carried authority. He realized that this human was unlike anything he had encountered. Not fragile, not extinct, not weak. Strong, patient, and intelligent in ways that defied his understanding. Over the next few days, Mara assisted with minor repairs around the station. She moved through corridors and maintenance shafts, fixing broken conduits, recalibrating sensors, and even assisting in the AI core. Every time she touched a system, the output improved beyond expectations. The crew began to notice a strange phenomenon. Mara's presence seemed to harmonize the station. Machines ran smoother. Systems that had been failing for months repaired themselves. Even the AI, which had been neutral and unemotional, began responding in a way that suggested curiosity. Yet the genetic scan still showed 99% unknown. No one understood what she was, where she came from, or how she survived. Rumors spread quietly through the crew. Some whispered she was a miracle. Others feared she might be a weapon. One evening, Dran approached Mara again, standing near the observation deck. "You are calm," he said. "You have faced nothing here, yet everything we know about life tells us you should not exist. How is it possible?" Mara turned to him, eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Life is not limited by what you know. You measure by the 99% that you understand. The remaining 1% is what shapes reality." Dran considered her words. He did not fully understand, but a spark of recognition ignited in his mind. He realized that humanity, or at least this human, had evolved in ways the galaxy could not yet grasp. A sudden signal interrupted the moment. The station's long-range scanners picked up a disturbance. Something was moving through deep space, heading directly toward Theta. The AI displayed no identification, no signature matching known species. The crew froze. Mara's expression remained calm. "Do not fear what comes. Prepare to understand it." As the alarm continued, Dran glanced at her. He could not read her intentions. But he knew one thing for certain. This human was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. She had arrived silently, yet her presence had already changed Station Theta forever. The shuttle doors sealed, the lights flickered, and the scanners kept reading 99% unknown. But Dran remembered her words, and they echoed in his mind, firm and undeniable. Worry about what you cannot control. And as the station waited for whatever came from deep space, Mara looked out at the stars, calm, confident, and ready. She was the 1% that the galaxy should fear. The disturbance in deep space continued to approach Station Theta. Its signature remained unknown. The scanners could not identify it as any living species or artificial object. The crew of the station grew uneasy, whispering about possibilities they could barely imagine. Mara remained calm, walking along the observation deck, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. Commander Dras paced in the control room, his long fingers tapping against the smooth console. "We have never seen anything like this," he said, his voice low but urgent. "It is too precise, too fast, and it avoids detection. The AI cannot even analyze it fully." Dran, the station biologist, sat nearby, staring at the latest scanner readings. "It is moving toward us deliberately," he said. "It is aware. It is intelligent. But more than that, it is responding to something we cannot measure." Mara entered the control room silently, her presence somehow grounding the anxious atmosphere. Dross turned to her, tense but curious. You are calm," he said. "Do you know what this is?" Mara shook her head slowly. "I cannot tell you what it is," she said, "but I can tell you that fear is your enemy. Observation, preparation, and understanding are your allies. Focus on what you can influence, not on what you cannot yet see." Dross and Dran exchanged uneasy glances. Mara's confidence was unsettling. The human's DNA had already baffled the station's genetic scanners. Now her knowledge and calmness in the face of an unknown threat made her even more mysterious. Over the next hours, Mara assisted the scientists in recalibrating the station's sensors. Every time she touched a system, the readings improved. Signals that had been lost in static became clear. Hidden energy patterns revealed themselves. Even the AI, which had been neutral and emotionless, began displaying subtle responses that suggested curiosity. Dran observed her closely. "Your presence. It changes the systems," he said quietly to her. "It is as if they recognize you. Even the AI reacts differently when you are near." Mara smiled faintly. "Life leaves traces even in machines. Systems can sense adaptation. They respond to it. I do not force them. They simply follow what is possible." As the unknown object moved closer, the station implemented emergency protocols. Shields were activated. Communication arrays were powered to full strength. Dross ordered the crew to remain alert. Yet Mara remained calm, moving through corridors and maintenance areas, checking equipment and repairing minor issues that no one else had noticed. During one inspection, Mara noticed a minor anomaly in the life support systems. A small conduit had been corroded by an unknown chemical, something the maintenance team had overlooked. She placed her hand on the conduit, and within seconds the material seemed to stabilize. Sensors detected no further corrosion. Dran watched in amazement. "How do you do that?" he asked. "This should not be possible. Even our best nanotech systems cannot repair damage this fast." Mara looked at him calmly. "I am not machines and I am not technology. I am something between, something beyond. Repair is not just physical. It is adaptation. Life survives by learning, by changing, by understanding the limits and breaking them." Dran was silent, realizing he had never met a being so alive, so capable of responding instantly to the environment. The AI added subtle data points that confirmed her presence improved efficiency in every system she interacted with. Later, Mara joined Dross in the observation deck. The unknown object was closer now. It appeared as a glowing, shifting mass of energy, changing shape as it approached the station. The crew grew tense. The shields glimmered under the strain. "Commander," Dran said, "the object is not attacking yet. But it seems curious. It moves like it is observing us, learning from our responses." Dross frowned. "If it is intelligent, then it can adapt to our defenses. We cannot predict what it will do next. We must be ready for anything." Mara stepped forward. "You worry about what you cannot measure. That is why you fear. But intelligence does not equal threat. Observation does not equal aggression. Prepare, yes, but do not act with panic." Dross hesitated. Mara's words had weight. She had already proven herself capable of interacting with systems beyond understanding. Perhaps her guidance could help them respond to the unknown without provoking it. Suddenly, the AI displayed a warning. The unknown object had emitted a pulse of energy. It was not harmful yet, but it disrupted the station's shields and sensors. Consoles flickered. Lights dimmed briefly. Dran ran to a scanner. "The energy pulse is reacting to Mara's presence," he shouted. "It is adapting to her. It changes whenever she is nearby." Mara looked at the readings and nodded. "Do not be afraid. This is not attack. This is recognition. Life, even in unknown forms, senses adaptation. It is curious. It wants to understand, just as we want to understand it." The crew watched as the energy mass shifted, pulsing with bright patterns that seemed almost like language. Mara leaned closer to the observation window. "It is learning from us. It senses the 1% that you do not understand. That is why it moves carefully. That is why it waits. Dross remained skeptical. If it is intelligent, how do we communicate? How do we prevent it from attacking? Mara turned to him, calm and resolute. You do not communicate with fear. You communicate by demonstrating understanding, by showing that life can adapt. It learns faster than you imagine, and it respects strength that is controlled, not reckless. Over the next several hours, Mara worked with Dran and the AI. They adjusted shields, repaired sensors, and mapped the energy mass's patterns. Every time she intervened, the object altered its trajectory slightly, avoiding certain areas of the station. It was as if Mara's calm presence and adaptive touch influenced its behavior. The crew grew more relaxed, though they remained cautious. Some of the younger scientists began whispering about the human. She is incredible, one said quietly. She is perfect. Others were wary. We do not understand her, another whispered. If she can influence the station and the object outside, what else can she do? Trent considered both sides. Mara was indeed extraordinary. She had survived alone for decades. She could repair and stabilize systems instantly. And she could influence an unknown, intelligent entity without aggression. But what was her purpose here? Why had she come to Station Theta? That night, Dross called Mara to his office. The observation deck outside glimmered with starlight. Mara entered, calm as always. You have proven remarkable today, Dross said. The object is still unknown. But it is responding to you. Why are you here, human? What is your purpose? Mara met his gaze. I am here to show that life is more than survival. Humans once vanished from the galaxy because they feared limits. They accepted boundaries. I am proof that limits can be broken. That is all, Dross frowned. Limits can also be dangerous. We have never seen anyone like you. You could be a threat, Mara smiled softly. Do not measure me by fear. Measure me by what I can do. The unknown does not define danger. The unknown defines opportunity. And opportunity is what humanity has always mastered. Dran entered quietly. Commander, she is not just repairing systems. She is changing them. Even the AI, it behaves differently near her. It learns faster, it adapts. We cannot explain it, Dross sighed. Very well. But we must remain cautious. The object is still approaching. We do not know if it intends to communicate or attack. Mara nodded. Then we prepare. Observe. Adapt. Learn. That is all any living thing can do when faced with the unknown. The hours passed slowly. The energy mass outside continued its deliberate approach. The crew worked tirelessly, adjusting shields, monitoring readings, and running simulations. Mara moved through the station effortlessly, checking systems, repairing faults, and quietly observing the reactions of the unknown entity. As dawn approached on the station's internal clocks, the object's pulses grew stronger, yet it did not attack. It was curious. It was learning. It was waiting. Mara stood at the observation deck once more, calm and confident, and said quietly to Dran, You see, this is the 1% you cannot measure. That is what matters. That is where life grows. That is where humans excel. Dran nodded slowly, realizing for the first time that humanity, or at least this human, had evolved beyond what any scanner, any measurement, or any intelligence in the galaxy could fully understand. And far outside the station, the energy mass pulsed again, sending waves across space. It was alive, aware, and it had noticed the human. It waited patient for the next move. Mara's eyes reflected the starlight as she whispered to herself, calm and prepared. Let it learn. Let it understand. This is only the beginning. Station Theta had changed. The crew had changed. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before. Humans were no longer just history. They were evolution, adaptation, and power beyond measurement. And Mara was living proof. Station Theta remained on high alert. The unknown energy mass had grown closer, its pulses stronger and more deliberate. The entire crew worked tirelessly to monitor its behavior, yet none could predict its actions. Mara moved calmly through the corridors, her presence seeming to steady the anxious minds around her. Commander Dross stood in the control room, watching the approaching object. It is not attacking yet, he said, voice tense. But it is intelligent. It is studying us. It adapts too quickly to be random. Dran nodded beside him. And it reacts to her presence, he added quietly. Every pulse, every movement changes when Mara is near. It is responding to her, but how? Why? Mara entered the room without knocking. Because life recognizes life, she said simply. Even if it is in forms you cannot understand, it senses intelligence and adaptation. That is why it waits. That is why it studies, not attacks. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had grown to trust Mara's abilities, yet she remained a complete mystery. Her DNA was still 99% unknown, a living anomaly that defied explanation. Dran had spent hours studying her samples, but every test revealed something new. Her cells repaired instantly. Her metabolism adapted to any environment. Her neural network seemed capable of anticipating situations before they occurred. Dran spoke quietly to Mara as she examined a broken console in the lab. I have studied life forms for decades, yet you are beyond everything I know. Your DNA is not just unique. It is adaptive, aware, alive in ways our systems cannot even measure. Mara looked up and smiled faintly. You do not need to understand everything to see what is possible. Humans learned long ago that adaptation is survival. But what you call unknown is simply evolution waiting to be recognized. Dross interrupted. Enough philosophy. The object outside is almost within range. We need answers. If it attacks, we must respond. If it communicates, we must understand. Suddenly, the energy mass outside pulsed violently, sending a wave of interference across the station. Shields fluctuated. Systems glitched. Lights dimmed and flickered. The AI emitted a warning. Mara did not move quickly, yet the energy wave seemed to pause around her presence. The system stabilized as if responding to her calm. Dran watched in disbelief. It reacts to her without her touching anything, he muttered. It adjusts, it learns. How is that possible? Mara turned to him. Life is not always measured by machines. Awareness does not always require thought as you define it. Some forms simply sense. They observe. And they respect strength that is controlled, not reckless. As the pulse faded, Mara approached the central console. She placed her hand gently on the surface. The console lights flickered, then began displaying patterns of energy, waves of light forming shapes and symbols. Dran stared at the readings. It's communicating, he whispered. Or it is trying to. Mara nodded. It senses me. It knows I am different. It wants to understand. That is why it shows patterns instead of attacking. Life responds to life when it can see intelligence. Dross studied the readings carefully. Can it be reasoned with? Can we communicate? Mara paused. Perhaps. But not yet. First, it needs to see that understanding exists here. That is why you prepare. That is why I'm here. Dran watched Mara closely. She was not just reacting to the energy mass. She seemed to anticipate it, adapt to it, guide it. Every time she interacted with the systems, every adjustment she made, the unknown entity responded. Later, Mara led Dran and a small team into the lab where the scanners had once registered her DNA. She activated the genetic analyzer and placed her hand on the sensor. The machine whirred, then displayed the usual reading, 99% unknown. But then it began to change. Symbols appeared across the screen, as if her DNA itself was communicating with the machine. Dran leaned forward, eyes wide. It is rewriting the readings. Your DNA is interacting with the systems directly. It is alive. Mara nodded. It has always been alive. Not in the way your machines measure life. Not in the way your eyes define life. But alive in the way the universe intended. Humans evolved to survive beyond what you call limits. Dross entered the lab, concern etched on his face. Limits can be dangerous, he said. You have no record of anything like this. How do we know you are not a threat? Mara smiled softly. A threat is measured by fear. I do not bring fear. I bring presence. I bring adaptation. You see only the 99% unknown. But the 1% you cannot measure is what matters. That is where life thrives. That is where humans excel. Dran watched as the scanners continued to adjust. Her DNA seemed to influence the readings, stabilizing anomalies and revealing patterns no one had ever seen. The unknown entity outside pulsed again, sending a wave of energy. This time, however, the station barely felt it. Systems adjusted before the pulse reached critical levels. It is learning faster, Dran whispered. It recognizes her presence. It is respecting her. Mara turned to him calmly. Intelligence respects intelligence. Strength respects adaptation. You will see how this works in time. Fear is always easier than understanding, but it is never stronger than life. As the hours passed, Mara continued to work with the AI and the scientists. She guided adjustments, repaired minor faults, and demonstrated control over systems that no one else could manage. The AI began displaying responses it had never shown before. It began interpreting energy patterns outside the station as potential communication rather than threats. Dross watched with growing unease and admiration. "We may not understand her," he said quietly, "but she is extraordinary. She stabilizes the station, she controls the systems, and she influences the unknown object without violence." Mara smiled faintly. "Extraordinary is only what is not yet understood. Humans learned long ago that survival depends on adaptation. Intelligence is not always visible. Strength is not always physical. And power does not always come from weapons." Later that evening, the energy mass outside stopped pulsing for a moment, hovering near the edge of the station's range. It was almost as if it was observing, waiting for a response. Dran studied the data and shook his head in disbelief. "It is communicating, not attacking," he said. "It waits because of her. It learns from her. That is incredible." Mara stood at the observation deck, her eyes on the energy mass. "Yes," she said quietly. "It waits because life respects life that can adapt. That is the 1% that matters. That is the part you cannot measure. That is where humans have always been strongest." Dross approached her. "You make it sound so simple. But how do we survive if it changes? If it attacks?" Mara turned, calm and confident. "Then we adapt faster. We observe, we learn, and we adjust. That is all any species can do when faced with the unknown. That is the difference between survival and extinction." For the next few hours, Mara worked with Dran and the AI, mapping the energy mass's behavior, predicting its movements, and stabilizing the station. Every adjustment she made caused subtle changes in the entity outside. The crew watched in awe as the unknown energy mass shifted in response to her presence, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like curiosity. Finally, as the station's internal clock approached the next cycle, Mara stood quietly at the observation deck. "The universe measures what it can," she said softly to Dran. "But the real power lies in what it cannot measure. That is why humans endure. That is why I am here." Dran looked at her, finally understanding the magnitude of what they were witnessing. This human was not just extraordinary. She represented the culmination of what humanity had always been: resilient, adaptable, and unbound by limits. And far outside, the energy mass continued to pulse and shift, aware and learning, waiting for the next move from the human who had entered Station Theta and changed everything. Mara's presence was calm, confident, and unwavering. The station, the crew, and the unknown object outside had all begun to respond to her in ways no one could have predicted. The truth beneath her skin was no longer a mystery. It was power. It was adaptation. It was humanity at its finest. Station Theta had changed. What had once been a research hub for quiet observation now hummed with tension and anticipation. The unknown energy mass hovered closer than ever, its pulses bright and deliberate. Every system in the station responded differently than before. Some failures that had lingered for years corrected themselves. The AI, once neutral and distant, now displayed subtle curiosity. And at the center of it all stood Mara, calm, confident, and completely in control. Commander Dross stood in the control room, his multiple eyes scanning every monitor. "The energy mass is still hovering," he said, his voice steady but tense. "We do not know why it has not attacked. We also do not know why the station is functioning better than ever." "What is she doing to it?" Dran, standing beside him, shook his head. "It is more than control. It is awareness. The station itself responds to her presence. Systems that were damaged, failing, or unstable are now operating beyond design specifications. Even the AI is learning from her." Mara entered the room quietly, her presence immediately calming the anxious atmosphere. "Learning is what all life does," she said softly. "Even the machines, even what you call energy. Observation creates understanding. Understanding creates survival." Dross turned to her. "Survival is not enough. The energy mass is still outside. If it attacks, we are not prepared for a direct assault. You have changed the station, yes, but can you control what is coming?" Mara smiled faintly. "Control is not necessary. Awareness is. Adaptation is. It will act as it senses intelligence. That is why it waits. That is why it studies. That is why it has not attacked." As the crew worked to monitor the unknown mass, the station's AI began displaying new symbols on the central console. Patterns of light pulsed and shifted in ways no one had seen before. Dran leaned forward, squinting at the screen. It is trying to communicate. The AI is translating energy patterns from outside. It is not aggression. It is observation, Mara nodded. Life seeks understanding first. Even when it appears dangerous, it evaluates before it acts. That is how humans survived for millennia. That is how they became what they are meant to be. Suddenly, alarms blared. The Galactic Council's ship had arrived, responding to a request from the station's leadership. The Council sent a team of officers aboard, their vessel large, imposing, and filled with advanced technology. Mara observed them calmly as they docked. Commander Dross greeted the Council team with cautious respect. The station has detected a previously unknown energy mass approaching. We require your assessment. The lead Council officer, tall and armored, stepped forward. We have received your request. Our scanners confirm an intelligent entity of energy approaching the station. Preliminary readings suggest adaptation beyond normal life forms. We will secure the human aboard for study. Mara's eyes narrowed slightly, though her voice remained calm. You do not understand. I am not a threat. I am the 1% you cannot measure. That is why the energy mass waits. That is why it respects the station. I am here to show that life adapts, evolves, and survives beyond limits. The Council officer frowned. We cannot take risks. Unknown biological entities of such potential cannot be ignored. You will accompany us for examination and containment. Dross stepped in. She is not a threat. The station has already stabilized under her presence. The energy mass has not attacked. She is not aggressive. She is extraordinary, yes, but not dangerous. The Council team did not hesitate. Soldiers moved forward to detain Mara. The station's alarms escalated, warning of interference in multiple systems. Mara did not flee. She stood calmly, eyes steady, watching the approaching guards. As they reached her, a pulse of energy radiated outward. The Council's devices faltered. Consoles shut down. Lights dimmed and flickered. The soldiers froze, unsure of what was happening. Mara extended her hand slightly, and the AI began to respond in a new way. Symbols and lights spread across every monitor, stabilizing the station in an instant. Systems that had been malfunctioning for decades now operated smoothly. The AI began interpreting signals from the unknown energy mass outside as deliberate communication, rather than a threat. Dran whispered to Dross, "She is not attacking. She is communicating, and the station itself is responding to her." Mara's voice was calm and steady. "Do not act with fear. Fear creates mistakes. Observation, adaptation, and understanding create survival. The energy mass waits because it recognizes intelligence. It does not attack because it senses life that adapts." The Council officer tried again, issuing commands to detain her. The soldiers approached cautiously. Systems across the station glitched, but Mara's presence corrected them immediately. The energy mass outside pulsed again. This time, the wave interacted with the station's systems, amplifying Mara's control. It was as if the energy entity was responding to her in real time. The Council officer backed away, clearly unsettled. "What is this?" he demanded. "How is she controlling the station without touching anything? How is the energy mass responding to her?" Dran stepped forward. "She is not controlling it. She is interacting with it. Awareness, adaptation, intelligence. These are things humans mastered long ago. She embodies them. The station and the entity outside respond because of her presence, not because of fear or force." Mara looked toward the observation deck, her gaze steady on the glowing energy mass. "Do you see? This is the 1% you cannot measure. That is where life thrives. That is where humanity has always excelled. It is not force. It is adaptation. It is understanding. It is survival." The Council officer hesitated, realizing that Mara was more than they had anticipated. He signaled for his team to halt their advance. Systems stabilized under her influence. The energy mass outside pulsed brighter, almost as if acknowledging her authority. Suddenly, the AI began displaying new data streams. It translated sequences of the energy mass's pulses into shapes and patterns resembling human communication. The AI interpreted them as intelligence, not aggression. Mara observed quietly, her eyes calm. Dran whispered, "It is learning from her. It sees her as a peer. It respects her presence, and she is teaching the AI to interpret it." Mara turned to Dross. "You see why the Council fears. You see why they do not understand. They measure life by what they know. But life does not exist only in what you measure. Life exists in what adapts, what survives, what evolves. The council officer finally spoke, his tone wary. This human is unlike anything recorded. Her DNA, her presence, her interaction with the energy mass, it exceeds our understanding. We cannot risk misjudging her. Mara remained calm. Then observe carefully, learn. Do not act out of fear. You will understand in time that the 1% you cannot measure is what shapes reality. Dran looked at her with awe. You are not just human. You are evolution made visible. You embody what humanity has always been capable of. Adaptation, survival, intelligence beyond measure. The energy mass outside pulsed again, sending waves across the station. This time it moved closer, its light filling the observation deck. Yet it did not attack. It seemed to study, observe, and respond to Mara's presence. Mara placed her hand gently on the central console. Symbols appeared across every screen, flowing like liquid light. The AI translated the sequences, showing patterns of energy and intent. Truss and the council officer watched in amazement. See? Mara said softly. It waits, it learns. It respects intelligence. It recognizes adaptation. That is why it has not attacked. That is why the station functions better than ever. Life responds to life that understands, adapts, and survives. The council officer took a step back, clearly unsettled but unable to deny the truth. The unknown entity outside, the station itself and Mara's presence all aligned in a way that no one had seen before. Dran whispered to Mara, "You are extraordinary. Beyond comprehension. The station, the energy mass, the AI, they all respond to you." "How is this possible?" Mara smiled faintly. "It is not magic, it is life. Awareness, adaptation, intelligence. Humans once disappeared from the galaxy because others measured us by what was visible. Now you see what we truly are. The 1% that cannot be measured is the most powerful force in the universe." The council officer, finally realizing the magnitude of the situation, stepped back. "We will observe. We will record, but we will not interfere." Yet Mara nodded. "Observe, learn, and respect. That is how life survives. That is how humans endure. That is how we thrive in the face of the unknown." The energy mass outside pulsed once more, almost as if acknowledging her words. The station stabilized, systems repaired themselves, and the AI began communicating sequences in ways it never had before. Mara's presence had awakened something in the station, something beyond technology, beyond science, and beyond fear. Dran looked at her in awe. "You are not just human. You are proof that humanity was never gone. You are proof that we adapted, survived, and evolved beyond measure." Mara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Now you see, humanity is not extinct. We have only begun. And the universe will learn that adaptation is stronger than fear, intelligence stronger than force, and survival stronger than aggression." Station Theta hovered silently in space, bathed in the glow of distant stars. The energy mass outside had grown brighter, its pulses steady and deliberate. Every system in the station now operated flawlessly, a result of Mara's presence and guidance. The AI had evolved under her influence, interpreting signals from the unknown entity as communication rather than a threat. The crew had come to trust her completely, though they still marveled at her abilities. Commander Dras stood on the observation deck observing the glowing energy outside. "It is still there," he said quietly, "and it has not attacked. Why is it waiting?" Dran beside him shook his head in awe. "Because of her. It responds to her presence. It recognizes intelligence. It adapts, it learns. It respects her because she is different, because she is human." Mara stepped forward, calm and poised, her eyes reflecting the brilliant light of the approaching energy. "You see the difference?" she asked softly. "You see why the 1% matters. You measure life by what you understand, but the real power exists in what you cannot measure. That is where survival begins. That is where humanity thrives." The Galactic Council officers had remained cautious but silent, observing Mara and the strange entity outside. Their scanners had begun picking up patterns in the energy mass, but no one could interpret them fully. Every pulse, every wave of light seemed deliberate, intelligent, and aware. One of the council officers finally spoke. "We cannot comprehend this. It reacts to her. It respects her. It communicates, yet it is not like any life we know. How is this possible? Mara smiled faintly. It is simple. Life always adapts. Life always learns. Humans especially survive because we recognize limits and then exceed them. You see 99% unknown, but that remaining 1%, the part you cannot measure, is where we create change. That is what you fear, and that is what you should respect. Dran watched Mara as she moved through the control room, touching consoles, adjusting readings, and guiding the station's systems. Every adjustment seemed effortless, yet it affected everything. The energy mass outside mirrored her actions in subtle ways, pulsing brighter when she touched a console, dimming when she paused. The council officer's voice was tense. She is influencing the station and the energy mass outside. If she can do this, what else can she do? What is her purpose here? Mara turned to him calmly. My purpose is not to control, but to demonstrate. Humans do not dominate life through force. We survive by adapting. We thrive by learning. We endure by seeing what others cannot. That is the 1% that changes everything. Suddenly, the energy mass pulsed strongly, sending a wave of energy across the station. Systems that had been stable for hours flickered. Lights dimmed briefly. The AI emitted a warning, but Mara did not move quickly. She remained calm, placing her hand gently on the nearest console. Instantly, the energy pulse was absorbed, redistributed, and interpreted by the AI. Dran whispered to Dras. It is as if she is speaking directly to it. She is not afraid. She is guiding it, teaching it, showing it understanding. Mara's voice was quiet but firm. Life does not need weapons to survive. Life needs awareness, adaptation, intelligence. That is why it waits. That is why it listens. That is why it respects humans, even when others do not. The council officers watched in silence, their expressions a mixture of fear and wonder. They had expected to contain her, to study her, to control her. Instead, they saw her command respect not through force but through presence, intelligence, and adaptation. The energy mass began to shift. Its form became more defined, pulses moving rhythmically like a heartbeat. The AI began translating patterns, revealing what seemed to be a form of intelligence, attempting to communicate with the station and Mara. Symbols flickered across every screen, forming shapes, sequences, and rhythms that no one had ever encountered. Mara stepped closer to the observation window, her eyes on the pulsating mass. See, it waits because it recognizes intelligence. It studies because it respects adaptation. It communicates because it sees the 1% you cannot measure. That is humanity. Dran nodded slowly, understanding the depth of what was happening. Mara was not just surviving. She was demonstrating the pinnacle of human evolution. Humans had survived extinction, vanished from recorded history, and yet they had adapted to exist beyond measurement, beyond expectation, and beyond fear. Suddenly, the energy mass pulsed brightly and sent a concentrated wave toward the station. Shields activated, but the energy seemed different this time, more focused, more deliberate. Mara placed both hands on the console, and the AI immediately responded. Patterns of energy flowed through the station's systems. The pulse was absorbed, redirected, and harmonized with the station's energy grid. Dran stared in disbelief. She is controlling the energy mass, but not through force. She is teaching it. She is communicating through understanding, adaptation, and presence. Mara's voice was calm. Life responds to intelligence. It respects survival that is guided by awareness, not fear. That is how humans endure. That is how we survive when others fail. The council officer finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. This is beyond anything we have ever seen. The human is not just extraordinary. She is proof that humans survived, evolved, and became more than history records. Mara turned to him, calm and unwavering. Yes, you see what the 1% can do? You see why measurement is limited. You see why humans endure when others fail. We adapt, we survive, and we thrive where others cannot. That is the truth of humanity. The energy mass began to shift again, forming a larger, more complex shape. It moved closer to the station, almost as if it wanted to be observed directly. The AI displayed intricate patterns, translating sequences into a form of visual language. Mara studied them quietly, then placed her hand on the console. Symbols and waves of light began to flow outward from her touch, connecting the station and the energy mass in a synchronized pulse. The AI interpreted this as a communication attempt. Slowly, the mass shifted, forming shapes that resembled a humanoid figure. It was as if it had recognized her as a peer. Dran whispered, "It sees her as..." Equal. It respects her. It communicates with her. She is teaching it without words, without force, only through presence. Mara turned to the crew and the council officers. This is the 1% that matters. You measure life by what you know, but real power exists in what you cannot measure. Understanding, adaptation, and intelligence are stronger than fear, stronger than weapons, and stronger than aggression. The energy mass pulsed brighter, and for the first time, a sense of calm spread through the station. Systems hummed in harmony. The AI displayed fully coherent patterns of communication. Even the council officers stood quietly, absorbing the truth of what they witnessed. Dross finally spoke, voice low and awed. She is humanity. She is what we never expected. She survived, adapted, and became something beyond measurement. Mara smiled softly. Humans were never gone. We learned, we adapted, and we evolved. Now the galaxy sees what we always were capable of. The 1% that cannot be measured is the most powerful force in the universe. It is what changes everything. The energy mass pulsed one final time, sending a wave of energy across the station. Instead of disruption, systems glowed brighter. Consoles displayed coherent sequences. The AI spoke in clear, logical patterns for the first time, translating messages from the energy mass into understandable data. Mara stepped back from the console and looked at the crew. Now you see, humanity is not just survival. Humanity is evolution. Humanity is adaptation. Humanity is life that cannot be measured but that always prevails. The council officer nodded slowly, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had witnessed. We will report this, he said. We cannot control it, but we can record it. This human, she has changed everything we know. Mara's gaze returned to the observation deck. The energy mass slowly moved away from the station, still glowing, still alive, but no longer a threat. It had learned, it had understood, and it had acknowledged humanity. Dran whispered, She is not just a survivor. She is proof that humanity never ended. She is proof that we adapted, evolved, and became more than history remembers. Mara smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. Humanity is not gone. Humanity has only begun. The 1% that cannot be measured is the future. It is power, intelligence, adaptation, and survival, and it is what the galaxy will remember. The station settled into a calm rhythm. Systems hummed perfectly. The energy mass drifted slowly into deep space, no longer threatening, but aware and respectful. The council officers and crew alike watched in silence, realizing they had witnessed something beyond comprehension, beyond fear, and beyond history. Mara stood quietly on the observation deck, calm, confident, and ready. Humanity had returned in a form the galaxy could never fully measure. Humanity had survived, adapted, and thrived, and the universe would never forget the lesson of the 1% that mattered.